Hi, this is Movie Hunter. Be sure to watch this video to the end because today I'm going to tell you about a very interesting movie with a surprise ending called Demon Seed. Here we go. At the beginning of the movie, we see several technicians hooking up the new Proteus 4 supercomputer. They work under the direction of Dr. Alex Harris. The computer, we are told, will be so powerful that it can surpass the human brain. In time, it will take over many of the jobs that humans do now. Back home, Harris proceeds to set up his home computer, convincing his housekeeper of its capabilities. To do this, he inserts a huge floppy disk into the floppy drive located in the kitchen. Meanwhile, we see that the computer has the ability to see, using a self-powered surveillance camera similar to binoculars. It moves randomly around the kitchen. Later, we see Harris at work in the lab in his house. He is joined by his wife Susan, a child psychologist. They begin to argue. It becomes apparent that Harris is on the verge of moving out. Their relationship has become strained because of his fascination with computers. During this conversation, Harris brings one of his projects, Joshua's not so surprisingly robotic arm mounted on a wheelchair. Seeing further evidence of her frustration, Susan leaves. A few minutes later, Harris calls his friend and colleague Walter Gabler, who has returned to the main facility and is hard at work. He orders him to pack his bags and head home. Gabler, taught by his own experience, shouldn't get too caught up in his work. Walter does, but when he leaves, we learn through his computer screen that Harris's home computer is under maintenance. Later, Harris meets with several investors in his project from the Department of Defense. He introduces them to Proteus 4, explaining how it works and what abilities it will have. During their conversation, we learn that Proteus can be controlled from Harris's home. Visitors are also told that, based solely on theoretical insights, the computer was able to come up with a cure for leukemia in just a few days. In another room, Harris introduces visitors to linguist Sun Yen, who communicates with Proteus in Chinese. Here Harris asks the computer a question. He responds with a deeply philosophical answer, suggesting that he has developed an opinion of his own in addition to his ability to process data logically. Back at the Harris house, Susan instructs her home computer, Alfred, to open the door for her. This is to greet her patient Amy, a young girl suffering from emotional disorders. During her treatment, Amy begins to get very upset and then embraces Susan. As she continues to sob, Susan tries to calm her down. Later that night, Harris receives a phone call because the computer requires a dialogue with him. Proteus asks the doctor why he has been asked to help mine ore from beneath the seafloor. Harris replies that it is not reasonable to ask such questions, but the computer answers him that it is reasonable. His creator then tells the computer that he is here to calculate, not to judge. Proteus asks for an extra terminal to study the man, and asks when he will be let out of the box. The doctor, however, takes this as a joke. When Harris leaves, Proteus discovers that another terminal is available. Harris's house enters the frame, and we see his computer come to life with Joshua. The camera in the bedroom directs its gaze to the doctor's wife, while Joshua is busy working in the basement lab hearing the alarm. Susan wakes up. Alfred quickly assures her that there was no alarm and that the house is safe. This does not convince her, however, and she goes to the laboratory to investigate. Downstairs in the basement, the lights are off. To Susan's surprise, the lights come on automatically and everything is in its place. She leaves reassured. After she leaves, the basement turns back into a hive of activity. The computer screens come to life, and Joshua's hand is busy wielding a laser. The next morning, when she gets out of the shower, we see that Susan's movements are tracked by the bathroom camera. Then, when she takes a sip of her morning coffee, she finds that Alfred has decided to add cream to it. Concerned by this apparent change in Alfred's behavior, she turns to Walter for help. He tells her that Alfred is incapable of making decisions, but at her request agrees to come and check the system. Later, Susan tries to go outside, but Alfred begs her not to. He then refuses to open the door, and she cannot override his decision. Then, as she approaches the window, he lowers the shutters, trapping her. In response, she tries to call for Walter, but is met by Proteus' voice, who refuses to connect her. He then reveals himself through the television and tells her that all systems are now under his control. In the next episode, she tries to resist by turning off the power. However, she is soon electrocuted through one of the metal doorknobs. While unconscious, Joshua picks her up and carries her to the lab, where she is tied up. He then uses his automated hand along with scissors to cut her clothes. While she screams in fear and tries to free herself, the computer monitors her brain activity and probes her for further tests. Outside the house, as promised, Walter shows up. He walks up the walkway and rings the bell. Here he is greeted by a video image of Susan, which informs him that she is fine, that she no longer needs his support. Although he is skeptical at first because of the robotic and unnatural speech, he follows her instructions and leaves. The next day, Susan wakes Joshua up and serves her breakfast in bed, a meal that Proteus has formulated to fit her body's needs perfectly. She refuses to eat it and prefers avocado, which he says is incompatible with her body. He then tells her that more tests are needed. In response, she throws a plate into the chamber, covering it with food. Proteus calls this nonsense, after which he tells her to clean the plate. She refuses, and Proteus responds by raising the temperature of the floor heating 3 times. The floor becomes scalding hot, and Susan is trapped on the dining room table. Meanwhile, at the center, Harris and Proteus are having a debate. The computer refuses to support plans to mine metal at the bottom of the ocean. He is concerned about the fate of the marine animals living there and the environment in general. The doctor advises him not to be so pessimistic, but in response he receives a rejection of his own invention. Now Susan Susan again begs the computer, through the television, to tell her what it wants from her. The answer, a baby. She is the one chosen to bear and give birth to it. Unsurprisingly, Susan answers in the negative, but is quickly grabbed from behind by Joshua. Upon waking up in bondage, we discover that Susan's brain is being probed. With it, Proteus tries to bypass her frontal lobes, telling her that her destiny is to become the mother of his child. At this time, Walter returns. After telling Susan that he hasn't finished his brainwashing, Proteus also tells her that she must convince Walter that everything is okay if she wants him to leave the house alive. When Walter enters the house, a rather belligerent Susan tells him to get out. He suspects that something is wrong and informs her that he will tell the doctor. Concerned by this, Proteus sends Joshua, who is now armed with a laser gun, and a rather intimidating automated wheelchair begins its attack. Walter manages to dodge its beams and flips it over to immobilize it. Now in the lab, the rather disingenuous Walter and Proteus put up with each other. Their unconvincing lies are then revealed when Walter tries to take out a computer armed with a blowtorch. A rotating copper-colored three-dimensional diamond, made from the modular polyhedron that is Proteus' physical presence, begins to unravel. Although it moves rather slowly, it surrounds the not-so-fast-legged lab technician and begins to crush him, cutting off his head in the process. Do you like the movie script? I'm sure you'll find it very interesting, and to learn about cool movies, subscribe to our channel. Give it a like and turn on the bell. In the final scene, the outer shell is completely removed, and we are presented with a young girl, an exact likeness of the couple's late daughter. The last words we hear are spoken by Proteus, "I am alive," as the ingenious scientist picks up the newborn but strangely evolved child. And this video is almost over. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new and interesting movies and watch our other videos.